So, first session of the day. I see people are still filling in here, but we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Rodney Grilly. I'm a principal consultant with Amazon Professional Services, and I would like to welcome you to the 2017 Worldwide Public Sector Summit Migration Track. Now, last year we had this track and we had two sessions. The first session I covered AWS Migration Planning, and then in the second session I covered an agile approach to accelerating mass migrations. And these sessions had a lot of detail in it, so I'm not going to rehash those again this year. What we chose instead was to develop 5 new sessions that dive deeper into our migration acceleration approach. All the sessions in this track will be held in this room today, so if you're interested in migrations, then you can camp out here all day. This session is, my CIO says that we're going all in and migrating to AWS. Now what? What do we do next? The session's broken down into 3 parts. In the first part, I'm going to cover the 3-phase approach to migrating. And based on that information, I'm going to hand it off to Michael Sciasenti, who is a senior product manager with Amazon Web Services Migration Services team. He is going to go into details about the app migration process and some of the tools that you can use to help with your migration. And then finally, we're very happy to have Alex Wu, the IT operations manager from the National Gallery of Arts, who is going to focus and tell his experience developing their next generation enterprise digital archive management system on AWS. And his story alone will give you a good sense of what we're talking about today from a framework, how it's actually applied within the customers that we're helping today. So, who can tell me what this is? Anyone? What's that a picture of? Mount Everest. Why is Mount Everest important? If your CIO is asking you to go all in, and in some ways you can look at it like asking you to, climb to the summit of Mount Everest. You're standing there and looking at Mount Everest. It's beautiful. It doesn't seem very far away, and it seems like it'd be pretty easy to get there. But in reality, it's very difficult. There's a lot of planning that you need to do if you want to achieve your goals successfully in the time frame you want. And take it a little bit further. Now, this is you standing there looking at the mountain. Your CIO is coming back and said, I had this great experience. I'm really inspired when I went to Mount Everest. And now I want you, as my most trusted advisor, to bring our entire organization along. I want you to help all of them achieve the same outcomes that I did when I went to Mount Everest. And so you go, okay, well, that doesn't seem too bad. But then you start looking. You're a global organization. You have people distributed all over the world. Your operations are everywhere. And now, how are you going to get all those people? How are you going to coordinate and get them moved? How are you going to, once you get them close to Mount Everest, and when you see down at the bottom, the Numsh Bazaar is one of the closest areas that you start trekking to on your way up to Mount Everest, at least to the base camp. Most people just make it to the base camp. And then it takes days and sometimes weeks to get from there to the Mount Everest base camp. There's a lot of planning, a lot of coordination. So think of this as your chance to go all in with AWS. Do you just want to charge the mountain? Or do you think you need to plan some? Do you need to coordinate it? Do you need to understand what you don't know before you jump in to migrating your applications? And this is a simple mental model that we use a lot in our conversations with customers. It's a simple 4-phased approach to your journey to the cloud. The first phase is project. This is where customers are exploring. They're not sure if they want to use AWS. They're not sure if it's going to add the value that they've heard of in discussions. So they do some proof of concepts. Next is the foundation phase. They've gotten a lot of good wins with AWS proof of concepts, and they start thinking about how am I going to extend my operating capability to start supporting deploying workloads to AWS. Once you build up some confidence with that, customers start to make decisions about going all in. Now they have the business case, they have the justification, and they have the skills and experience running applications on AWS. And so now they start looking at, I need to shut down the data center on this date, or I need to prevent a renewal of a hardware refresh for either my platform, my network, my storage. And now they start getting hard deadlines. And so you jump into the migration phase. Then you look at the optimization phase. Once you started moving workloads into AWS, how do you start to improve them and make them cloud optimized? And when we're talking with the case study with the National Gallery of Arts, what they're looking at is their next generation application. So they're already thinking of a little bit of optimization as the starting point for this specific workload. So what do you think our biggest challenge with customers is, though? Their CIOs are asking them to go on, and this has been in the last 18 months. Their CIOs are asking them now to go all in. And where do you think they are on this chart, though? Many of them are still down at the project level, maybe touching into the foundation, but they aren't ready. And so from a professional services perspective, we're constantly telling customers, wait, slow down, you need to prepare first. You can't jump in. It's great to have decisions to go all in, but we want you to be successful. You need to be able to operate and sustain operations on AWS before you can just start to move your whole business in. We don't want you to have risk. We want you to have long-term satisfaction and get high value from migrating to AWS. So we, based on that, had to come up with some changes in the way we help customers approach going all in. So we have this three-phase journey that we discussed with customers, and we've refined it down to the point where we're really trying to commoditize almost IT transformation. How can we take things that typically take customers 6 months to 18 months, and how can we refine that down into 6 months or less? So the first phase is all about readiness assessment. You need to know where you're at today before you can figure out how you're going to achieve the target that you're trying to reach. And so we go through a 1-month process. It's actually 1 month calendar time, but it's a 1 month process to assess where you are today so you can understand, based on where you are, where you're going to go. And then we go into a 4 to 6 month readiness and planning project, which then allows you to not just assume how much it's going to cost and how long it's going to take and what skills and competencies your staff will need, but will allow you to actually implement it at a smaller scale so you can get validated learning from experiments, so you then have high confidence in building a longer-term migration plan and being able to execute it on schedule. Then finally, once you have that confidence, you're into migration mode. And now, whether it's 6 months or 12 months or whatever the target is, you're going to have confidence telling your executives that, yes, we can achieve that date to shut down that data center. Yes, we can prevent ourselves from renewing that multi-million-dollar contract for services and support. So now I'm going to drill into these three areas a little bit. So the first is, as I said, the readiness assessment. Now, the readiness assessment is 63 questions. So it's a quick questionnaire that we walk you through, and those questions are based on our 6 perspectives from our cloud adoption framework. And that covers our business, people, governance, platform, security, and operations. So what we'll typically do is we get you the questions ahead of time, you start to answer them, think about them within the different stakeholders in your organization, and then we hand it off and come in for maybe a 4 to 6 hour session where we help you score yourself. And we get the red, yellow, green type of scores, and we get that analysis back. Now we understand where you're at across all these perspectives, and we understand from a broad sense what you need to do to move forward. Just like if you were going to go to Mount Everest, and you have a bunch of staff with you, your core team, maybe some of them have gone to the gym and climbed the rock wall. Maybe some of them have gone mountain climbing, but maybe none of them have ever climbed Mount Everest. So they're going to have different levels of skills. We need to understand where you're at as an organization, and more importantly, where your individual staff are, so we can help them be successful in the journey as well. Next, we go into that readiness and planning phase. Now again, if you're going to take your whole organization and help them climb Mount Everest, you need to do it first. And so what we do is look at the 8 work streams that you see at the bottom. We have planning, security and compliance, discovery and analysis, landing zone, operations, people skills and organization, the migration process and the experience, and the migration business case. Now, based on this, these 8 work streams, we, within 4 to 6 months, want to take at least up to 5 applications that you have and move them into production. This allows you to extend your operational capabilities. It allows you to automate. Now, later when Alex comes up here and talks about the National Gallery, I'm currently working with his team to go through this process. And it's amazing how quickly an organization can move. In their case, I've been there 15 days, and within those 15 days, we have designed their landing zone. That's all their AWS accounts. We have then used our security compliance accelerators for them to automate and build the environments within those 7 AWS accounts. They've integrated with their Active Directory using ADFS, so they don't have these separate identities hanging around. They've used some of our tools to start moving and changing their operational capabilities. They have processors for moving their golden images or their standard OS images from on-prem into AWS. And they're already building out that EDAM system that I told you about. They're already building out the dev environment so their dev teams can come in and start developing their next generation application. 15 days, and they were able to achieve all that. Why? Because they're using a very prescriptive approach, and they're ensuring that they're driving down risk by looking at all these different perspectives and making sure they're executing them in concert. So based on that, once you get past that first phase, you've migrated a number of applications. You have confidence. You've updated your business case, because once you migrate 5 applications, guess what? You know how much it's going to cost you to move an application into AWS. You know how long it's going to take your staff and your organization based on your own internal processes. And you have a great sense. So imagine you're climbing Mount Everest and you've taken your first team there. You have gone up and down and you've made it to the summit 5 times already. You are confident that you can do this over and over again, and you understand much better what it's going to cost and take. Based on that, what I'm looking at here, or what you're looking at here on the screen, is that base camp that you have. This isn't the base camp. This is the Sherpa capital in Nepal. This is where the experts live. We want your team to become those experts. So when you bring along the remainder of your organization, you are the experts. AWS and our partners back off, and now you become the internal consultants that are going to help guide the remainder of your organization to your target goals. So some of the best practices that you use to execute: one is getting that very strong executive buy-in. Without executive buy-in, it's much harder to achieve these types of goals, especially going all in. Next, experimentation. By doing this small planning project that we talked about, around 4 to 6 months, you're actually experimenting on a smaller scale and getting validated learning. You're following the prescriptive process that we've helped define for you. And then you're leveraging AWS professional services and our partners. Based on the latest learning that we're getting from helping our broad set of customers, we can actually help you accelerate your core team's learning and readiness. That's the goal here. How quickly can you move, but how can you do that in a way that you've learned along the way so your longer-term migration can be a success? So the question to you is, which path will you choose? You can charge the summit. You can take the pressure from executives that say, we need a 3-year migration plan and we need it before we start anything. Or you can say, no, I need 4 to 6 months and a small amount of budget so I can get the information I need to give you a plan that we can execute successfully as an organization. And that's the assess, prepare, and execute. One path is filled with enjoyment and fun and learning. The other path, we've all been there before, and we don't want to go there again. So that's covering my section. I teed it off for you, and now we're going to hear from Michael to talk about some of our services and processes.
Thank you, Rodney. Thank you, everyone, for coming today. My name is Michael Shosheni. I'm a product manager at AWS. And I'll be talking to you a little bit about a proven methodology for moving your applications into AWS. And so this is part of those 5 applications you're going to move initially during the migration readiness and planning, and then during your longer migration phase. So what we have here are the 4 key phases to an app migration. And this represents the overall value stream for moving one of your business processes or apps into AWS. This is what you'll build your migration factory around. And so at a high level, the discover phase is about making sure you understand the application, both its technical and business requirements. During the planning phase, we'll determine how and when to migrate the application to AWS. During migrate and validate, we'll move the workload to AWS and we'll test it. Once we validated and tested it, we'll operate and optimize the application. So you'll manage the app once it's in AWS, and you'll be continuously looking for performance improvements and cost improvements. So we're going to dive into each phase briefly. So why do we do the discover phase? There's three reasons. First, to understand costing. We want to know what is the cost to migrate this app and operate in AWS so we can have an informed business case for moving into AWS. Second, for planning. We want to get the right inputs, runtime dependencies, the architecture of the app, other app dependencies, so we understand how we need to move our applications together, because some apps may have dependencies on each other. Finally, during discovery, we need to understand the architecture of the application so that we can have the right information to make a decision around the disposition of the app once we move it into AWS. So most customers with a significantly sized portfolio are relying on traditional CMDBs, which are typically out of date, or they don't have this information. And they've asked us to help them and do something quickly. In the past, they would perform manual discovery. This would involve interviewing app owners and business stakeholders, and it was a tedious process and would hamper their migration process. And so they've asked us, is there something better? Is there something better than interviewing everyone? And instead, customers today, and what we recommend, is relying on automated methods of capturing the technical requirements for your applications so you can make the critical decisions much more quickly. And so we have some tools, and our partners have tools that can help accelerate this. First, I want to talk a little bit about the dispositions I mentioned. There are 6 dispositions on how you can move the app into AWS. And the information you collect in discovery informs which type of disposition you're going to use when you move. And so throughout all the phases of migration, we'll consider these six R's of migration, as we call them. So starting at the top, retain is we keep the app as is. So we keep it where it is. It makes the most sense to leave it in the data center it's in or wherever it's operating. And there's not a lot of value in that, but it's very low in complexity. Retire is we're saying the app is no longer needed or it's duplicative. So we've used the discovery data that we've collected to determine this app, it's a duplicate of another app, or it's simply no one is using it. For repurchase, you take the application and you either bring your license into AWS or you purchase it from the AWS marketplace and you follow the vendor's standard backup and restore process of your data. And so for example, if you buy it from the marketplace, you can have the confidence that it's AWS ready, and there's a lot of benefits to that. So often we'll get scalability and other advantages. Next, as we start to increase our complexity, we also increase the value. Many apps you'll want to re-platform. So here, the benefit is that you get both security and support benefits. By re-platforming, you're upgrading the underlying OS, other app dependencies, or database servers that the app depends on. And so, for example, you can go from Red Hat Enterprise Linux 6 to Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7, or you can upgrade the version of MySQL that the database server relies on. And with that comes all the advantages of the latest security and performance improvements which come with your underlying platform. And if, in some cases, you may be using an OS that's out of support lifecycle, and so you can now use one that's getting regular updates. Finally, the highest value thing you can do with an application is refactor it. And so this is where, before you move it into AWS, you'll re-architect it to take advantage of native AWS services from day one. And so there's a lot of value in this, but because you're actually touching the code, there'll be more complexity. And so in order to gather the information to inform which disposition to choose and help plan the costing and overall app planning, we have the application discovery service at AWS. ADS runs on all your servers, so both physical and VM. It's able to collect performance data and key technical specifications. It's cost effective. There are only daily limits on the amount of data you can store in the service. And it's very easy to export the data and then analyze it elsewhere to get deep insight into your application portfolio. Our partners also have some great discovery tools, and those were talked about in last year's talk that Rodney referenced. So once we've gathered the necessary information and discovery, we're ready to plan our app migration. And the key goal here is we want to create a framework for migration success. And so once complete, once you finish planning that app migration, you'll have a runbook for migrating the app to AWS and a post-migration runbook for operating the app in AWS. Your playbook, which is your bigger strategy, how you as an organization are going to approach discovery, assessment, design, and execution, and then ultimately operating the app, was already decided in previous parts of your migration planning. But your playbook is going to inform the app migration plan. So using discovery data, you'll select the disposition. So you'll figure out how you want to move the app, and that'll give you a template of a migration runbook. You'll also select the appropriate landing zone, security and governance and compliance requirements for the app, and that all is informed by your bigger strategy that you've selected. And so you'll take that migration runbook and you'll customize it for your requirements. And we base it on your business continuity plan. So we take a failover runbook approach. So we make sure we control as we migrate, and we do not break your SLAs. And we work backwards from your existing disaster recovery plan and existing runbooks. And the outcome here is that if those are out of date, which oftentimes they are, you'll have a refreshed business continuity plan that's documented and published on your knowledge base, in addition to your migration runbook and how to operate the app once it's in AWS. And here too, tools like the application discovery service and AWS Marketplace and some of our partner tools can help accelerate this process. Throughout all these phases, there are tools that help automate and accelerate your migration of your application. Once we've planned the particular app migration, we're ready to migrate and validate. So this is where we're going to execute the migration runbook, and this is usually done in sprints, and depending on the complexity of the migration, it could be one or more sprints. Once you've moved the app into AWS, you run a set of validation steps. Usually this is a mix of automated, manual, and user acceptance tests. And then you perform final cutover once it's validated. And then you operate the app using those SOPs or runbook that we created during the planning phase. The outcome of Migrate and Validate for the application is that it's running and being used by users in AWS. And if you have existing servers that are no longer running any workloads, you now can shut those down. Here too, we have some tools that help automate this process. And I'm going to talk briefly about two of the tools we offer at the resource level. The first is the server migration service. This helps with the rehost disposition. It automates an incremental replication of live server volumes to AWS. And so you can use it to orchestrate large-scale migrations into AWS and easily track the progress. It's also cost-effective. You only pay for EBS storage and some transient S3 usage. Now you can use it to migrate your existing servers or to build out new processes for your net new applications. Alex from the National Gallery of Art, who's going to speak next, they have a great use case for this. SMS supports their operational capability of managing base images. So this is an existing operational capability they already have. So they have a runbook built around this process. And SMS is a key part of it. They build a standard OS image in VMware in their existing data center. And every time they change that image, they first change it in VMware. Then they use SMS to automatically replicate it into AWS. And so they can be confident whatever changes they made in VMware are now being replicated in AWS. And so for these net new apps that they're going to start using in AWS and building, they know that the base image that they're going to launch in AWS matches what they have in VMware. And so it's always up to date. We also have some tooling around helping you move your databases. It's a database migration service. This helps with both the rehost disposition, so moving your servers one-to-one into AWS, and it does replatforming. There's actually two tools that are part of the database migration service. DMS, the database migration service itself, and the schema conversion tool. And together, these three tools can help you modernize, migrate, and replicate your databases into AWS. So the database migration service lets you easily and securely migrate into AWS and or replicate your databases and data warehouses into AWS. The schema conversion tool converts your commercial database schemas and data warehouses into open source or AWS native schemas automatically. So you can go from MySQL to Amazon Aurora, or you can go from Postgres to Amazon Aurora, or you can move other data warehouses into Redshift, or you can other commercial databases. And so these three core things you can do with DMS. With Modernize, you're converting from one database engine to another. The schema conversion tool can also update the associated application code using its code conversion features. And it'll flag any issues that you need to go manually correct. The migrate scenario is just like SMS, so you're simply moving data from A to B, but it also lets you do some replatforming. So you can go from an older version of MySQL to a newer version of MySQL, or you could go from MySQL to Aurora very easily. And finally, you can also replicate. So you can keep the changes flowing from your existing databases into the new database in AWS for however long you need. And to date, we've migrated over 26,000 unique databases, and that number is going up every day. And this is a very powerful tool to automate and speed the migration of your applications to AWS. So finally, we get to the operate and optimize phase. This is a continuous process, and there's some key pieces within it. First, you're going to evaluate the migration. So you want to evaluate your success and performance metrics to make sure that the application is operating as you intended. There will be a support transition for your users and business issues that might arise once it's in AWS. You'll also review security and governance and compliance. Here too, we have tools that help. You would have already selected these tools when you built your overall migration strategy in previous phases. And some of the tools at a very high level that we offer are the well-architected framework, our AWS Trusted Advisor, AWS Shield, compliance reports, billing and cost management, and AWS CloudTrail. We have a large number of tools to help you with compliance and security once you've moved into AWS. Finally, you'll manage the application in AWS. And here too, there's a large number of services we offer that help make this very straightforward. The first is the AWS Managed Services. So this is where we manage your infrastructure operations for you. Our partners offer similar managed services too. So if you don't want to manage it, you can work with AWS Managed Services to manage it once you're here. The AWS Service Catalog has a catalog of approved applications and their configurations for what your users can run inside of AWS, and so it gives you a great level of control. AWS Config lets you assess, audit, and evaluate the configurations of your AWS resources. So if you have developers launching resources and you want to make sure they're only launching ones with specific requirements like encryption enabled and other things, you can use AWS Config to help detect and remediate that. We have EC2 Simple Systems Manager, which lets you can automate configuration and management of EC2 instances. And finally, CloudWatch, which lets you automate common IT operations and remediation when issues arise. And once you're managing your app, you're going to want to start refactoring it. So you want to start taking advantage of native AWS services. And so you can realize operational efficiencies and cost savings much more rapidly by starting to identify where you get the most value by starting to take advantage of some of our AWS services. And that's the overall process and best practices around moving your applications to AWS. It's now my pleasure to introduce Alex Wu, who's the IT Operations Manager at the National Gallery of Art. He's going to talk a little bit about their journey to AWS. Thank you.
Good morning. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Technology glitch. Well, hopefully that wakes you up. My name is Alex Wu. I'm the IT Operation Manager with the National Gallery of Art. I'm very excited to be here. So for the next couple hours, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to PowerPoint you to death at this early in the morning, but I will have a plain conversation about what we're doing migrating to the cloud using this pilot process. But before I get there, let me tell you a little bit about the gallery. The gallery was conceived and given to the people by Andrew Mellon. Mellon was a financier and art collector, as well as serving as a Secretary of Treasury in the 1920s. Now, during his tenure, he was convinced a budding nation should have a world-class national art museum comparable to those of other nations. So in his pursuit, he had identified a future site for the gallery at the cross-section between 6th and Constitution Avenue, and selected the renowned architect, John Russell Pope, the same architect who had given us the Jefferson Memorial, to sketch out this magnificent architecture. And in 1937, with the endorsement from President Roosevelt, Congress accepted this donation and established National Gallery of Art. The museum was dedicated on March 17, 1941. This building is commonly known as the West Building. It houses the works of art of the old master, as well as rare sculptures and furniture. The East Building was added in the 70s, and it focuses on the modern connections. And the Sculpture Garden was added in the 90s. During the summer months, right now, every Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock, we host jazz concert. It is the biggest venue in town with live music and drinks. And during the winter months, we convert our water fountain into ice rink. So it truly is a place for all to enjoy all year round. Now, the mission of the gallery is to play in a national role in preserving, collecting, exhibiting, and fostering the understanding of works of art at the highest museum and scholarly standards. Now, before I go to the next slide, just want to show a hand. How many of you are program manager, operation manager, or contracting officer? Welcome. How many of you have been given the responsibility to lead the cloud migration? Congratulations. How many of you are already done? Okay. Don't worry. This is our main therapy group, and we will start meeting once a week today. So I don't know about you, but as a program manager, when I was given the opportunity to lead, I immediately went to my managerial toolbox and looking for answers. Am I too early? Am I too late in the adoption cycle? I don't want to be a guinea pig, and certainly don't want to be the last. And what milestone should I put on into my project plan to safeguard the project? And who do I pick to form that rock star team? Remember that backyard street sports that we used to play when we were a kid? I want you, I want you. Yeah, exactly. And as an operation manager, I immediately associate myself with process-oriented cycle, the plan, do, check, act. And if that wasn't enough, my process better be mature enough that yield repeatable success. And last but not least, the FAR, right? The Federal Acquisition Regulation. We gotta know how to buy the thing. Before you know it, I have a perfect recipe for panic attack. In fact, the only thing I got perfected in that never-ending cycle of pending attacks was updating my resume, copy to a USB drive, and be ready to contact my former manager to catch my old job back. See, plain to check app, floppy drive to USB drive, CMI level 5, yuck. Well, relax. It's not as bad as you think. So let me share with you what we're doing with the pilot. Now, through the Cloud First initiative, more than 40% of our IT assets are already in the cloud. Going forward, we're going all in, cloud only. So as such, we will need a grander overarching plan. And the first step in that process is to catalog your environment. And I don't mean by physical asset configuration audit, right? People who come from DoD will understand what I'm talking about, PCA. How many PC do you have? No, that's not what we're talking about here. It's about the organizational portfolio of service. Like you, similar to you, we have financial, we have administrative, we have security, we have facility, general IT services, and we also have our mission-oriented ArcCare systems. So knowing what you have, what each system does, what they interact with, and the method for which they're interacting with each other is going to be important elements for this step. So once you have that information, the next step is to begin the down select process. It's, as you go through this process, you will identify systems that are candidate for the cloud migration, such as the 6 Rs. So, and don't be surprised as you go through this process that some system will be swap out better, depending on how it fit or don't fit into your organizational picture. But nevertheless, the important thing is to formulate this picture-perfect end state for your organization. And how many people have eaten pizza before? Yeah, me too. That 18-inch large pie, right? Do you shove it in one big gulp or do you eat it one by one slice at a time? Cloud migration is very similar to eating a pizza. It's based on your ability to consume the resources. Now, once you have this picture-perfect end state, and remember that state, as always, the next thing is to start getting your business owners buy-in. And this is the place we will identify business owner who we classify as the innovators, early adapters for cloud. And we must be able to communicate in their language so that we can relate to them. Most of us in the audience are probably not focusing on top-line revenue sale as their principal function, but every one of us is probably very concerned about operating efficiency. So this is where you need to find a common language to be able to relate to the business owner, maybe the manpower, top line, bottom line. This is a good time to go to Barnes & Noble and pick out a page and figure that out. Resource, facility, trying to create that win-win elevator speech that you heard so much about and sell it. So in our case, we chose our next generation enterprise digital asset management system. That system was chosen because of ever-expanding needs for compute, storage, and assets for high-definition photos and videos. And through this system, our team will be able to learn about the AWS feature and be ready for implementation for greater things. Now, once you have the buy-in from the business owner, it's time to execute. Our philosophy is to teach us how to fish, tell us how to make it delicious, so we can make it ourselves as well. For this stage, we establish a direct IDIQ contract with AWS to procure the environment as well as acquire the consulting service. Now, you might be wondering, why did we go direct? As a small organization, we were brand new to AWS, and we do not have the institutional knowledge to be able to quantify and qualify what we're trying to purchase from the reseller. So we leverage this opportunity to roll our hands, the sleeves up and learn about it so that we can be ready for better things. But contracting alone isn't the only thing. It's actually just the beginning. How many people have heard of people process tool? Yeah, I think we all heard of it before. Now, if you have not sent your technical core into the architecture training, I urge you to do so. Therefore, you can equip them with the foundational knowledge that they will be able to communicate your requirements and able to execute your technical implementation needed. And as for the process and tool, each organization has your own governing processes. And you know that organizational process very well, and you know which one of these approval gates are going to take the longest. So work with your stakeholders and gain that approval for preliminary execution so your team does not have to wait for months and sometimes years to begin the implementation. Now, it's also possible that going through this process, you will look at your organizational governance processes and realizing some of those processes will have to be changed. So this is where, as an organization, you had to take a bold step in empowering the execution. So work with your stakeholders using this process to identify the long lead time and calibrate them. How many of you have been to the doctor's office and getting your prescription? Yeah, I am. I do that a lot. So for the prescription to be effective, you must take the prescription in a certain way in order for it to be in effect in helping you, getting you better. Well, cloud migration is very similar to that. And as you go through this journey in this process, you will encounter different things as you progress through this process, and you will realize, you know what? If I were just be able to work these upfront and sometimes real time, all I have to do is sit back and relax and enjoy the show. So requirements, everybody? That the nightmare for any manager deploying the service is that they become irrelevant. Therefore, having a clear understanding of a requirement is going to be very important. But by now, it should be pretty clear to you that requirement management alone is not going to be enough. Frequently, often than not, the reason why something fails is because the lack of organizational fitness. So as you go through this process, you need to work with your stakeholder and make sure the organization embrace the change and champion the change. And as you lead your organization in this cloud migration, and if just keep in mind to focus on integrating these three things, and that will bring you to your desired end state. And enjoy the conference and come visit the gallery, and thank you.
And so one quick note, and then we're going to go in the Q&A. So you do have papers that you should fill out. Let us know how this session went. Let us know what we should do and change for next year as well. And then we're actually going to jump into Q&As. So we have somebody here. Raise your hand if you have a question.
Hello. It's on? Okay. Yeah, I talked about the 6 R's earlier, about the way of transitioning over to the cloud itself. Now, inherently, Amazon Web Services was based on a bunch of cloud concepts, which has its own benefits. For example, elasticity, having some type of built-in COOP capability. At what phase of the 6 R's do you start that? Because from what I saw, it was just the last phase is when you consider the cloud benefits. I would think you want to start that earlier than the last phase.
It's really based on your business drivers. So if you need to get out of a data center, we have customers that come to us and say, hey, in 90 days, I need to be out of a data center. And so we based on those business drivers and deadlines, you use the 6 R's, as Mike talked about, to go through and figure out what is the next state that's going to achieve your business goal of getting out of the data center, maybe a lift and shift or rehost, but then over time you can optimize. For other customers, they're actually going through and re-architecture first. So the R's are there to help you, but it's really your business drivers and your deadlines that's going to allow you to choose as an organization which paths you choose.
What I'm saying is, when you do the transition, there's a lot of benefits within the cloud itself. And I don't think you want to wait until the last phase of re-engineering, and you want to take in some of the consideration earlier than the last R.
Okay, so your follow-on was making sure that you, as early as possible, take advantages of some of the cloud capabilities. Definitely agree with that. But we also, it's very important to make sure you hit your business deadlines and goals. And so as long as you can optimize, but still not use the optimization and have it push you past your deadlines or dates, then definitely you can move as far up the stack as possible. Does that make sense? Because it comes down to those business drivers. Okay? Oh, no worries. Next question. We got 3 minutes left for questions. Yeah, here we go. Oh.
I just have a question for Mr. Wu. Did you do the total? This isn't working. Did you do the total?
Yeah,
Is it working?
Yes.
Okay,
Just
the
speak into
total
it.
migration, did your agency do it, or did you use a AWS partner?
Great question. So we're actually using, Ron is actually our consultant, and he's leading us through the process to do this pilot migration. So once we have our understanding of how everything works, then it will allow us to pave the way for the bigger migration of the agency.
So Alex is actually, and the Gallery of Arts is actually in that phase that I talked about, that readiness and planning phase. And so they're actually going through, I'm helping guide them, but they're doing the work. They're doing all the hands-on, they're building their knowledge base, building their run books, and they're all learning at the same time. And then, as Alex said, as they finish this application, which is one of their pilot applications, then we will start to back off. His team becomes the experts, and they will guide their organization through the remainder of the migration. In this case, your follow-up question was, they won't need a partner. Right now, they're not looking at using a partner for long-term managed services or
right
other
now,
guidance.
just to clarify that, right now we're trying to learn about AWS. And then because as a small organization, we really don't have the resource to do all those research, like DoD or DOS. So we use this opportunity to get a first-hand knowledge to work through our CNA process, the CCB, and any other modification that we might need, and to build out the environment, because that's really the longest part, the longest pole in the tent.
Okay, excellent. Another question?
Also about the readiness and planning, what do you see as the most common mistakes in that phase? I have a client that's going through that phase right now.
In the readiness planning, what's some of the common challenges? The common challenges are staff aren't dedicated to the project. It's not ran as a program with dedicated resources, and because of that, and they're not executing it using a more agile approach or a more at least managed approach. We like to have maybe 2 to 4 Scrum Masters running independent teams of like 3 to 5 people for larger organizations, and many times customers aren't dedicating that, and so they fall prey to every time a resource gets pulled off to work on something else, another duty is assigned. That really makes the overall program suffer, and it extends the time as well as the cost and diminishes the outcomes. So that's the most common. Thanks. Next question.
Mr. Wu, you said you got an IDIQ direct with AWS. I'm with the Department of Navy, and our contracting office is telling us that we can't go direct to AWS. We have to go through a reseller. So I'm wondering how you did that.
Great question. And is that the NAVSEA or which one? I know you have 5 system commands. So anyway, yeah, we started that journey as well. And my manager, who actually got me connected with Gartner, and we had a quick chat with them because we were like, we really don't know enough, and we don't know how to buy and how much to buy. And as an organization, the last thing we want is to obligate ourselves to such a buy that we will never use, and your funding is tied up. So that's why through that process, we decided, well, let's try these, go direct. What's going to hurt? Because we're right here. What you're going to do is the only way to go is go up.
Cool. Okay, everyone. Thank you very much. We are out of time. They need to set up for the next session. So hopefully you enjoyed the session and enjoy the remainder of the summit. Thank you.